One of my favorite things about video games are boss fights, and the Monster Hunter franchise's call to fame is that it's completely comprised of monstrous boss battles. In fact, the entire loop of Monster Hunter games is preparing for a hunt, hunting a monster, and using the bones, flesh, and icky internal goop to craft armor and bigger weapons to smash other monsters into the dirt with. Monster Hunter Wilds dropped at the end of February, and over the past month, I've been grinding my way through, as quickly as I can with my full-time job and weekly video release schedule. You're watching Rayl Deal Games, and today, I'll be explaining why Monster Hunter Wilds is the perfect entry point into the Monster Hunter franchise for beginners. Wilds is the second Monster Hunter title I've played, as I played 60 hours of Monster Hunter World back in 2018, and that 60-hour time commitment is part of the reason I'm making this video after 60 hours in Wilds. As you'll see as we make our way deeper into this video, Wilds manages to compress the Monster Hunter experience, distilling it down into its densest components, which is one of the core reasons the title is more easily digestible for a newer player. To explain why this is, I'll be analyzing the boss design, weapons, grinding, and story of this game. There will be light spoilers in this video for some mid-game monsters, late-game grinding, and thematic story content. If you want to play Wilds completely blind, this isn't the video for you, and I would recommend checking this video out later. With all of that established, let's dive right in. Since Monster Hunter Wilds is all about hunting monsters and carving them into crafting materials, boss design is one of the key elements a game like this must get perfect. And Monster Hunter Wilds has loads of interesting boss designs that are fun to hunt to the point of ad nauseum. One thing I loved about World and Wilds is the way that there's a clear focus on a logical hierarchy for the food chain of each individual environment. Each monster demonstrates some sort of evolutionary track, which makes the raw design of their monster models and attacks enhance the environmental storytelling of the game. One of the best early game examples of this is Lalabarina, the dancing rose spider, which matches the meaning of its name extremely well. The best thing about this monster is the way that it uses the rose on its back to attract its prey, an element of its design represented via its boss fight mechanics with the way Lalabarina spreads paralyzing pollen around by ruffling her rose abdomen. There's a fencer design to this boss as well with the way it pirouettes around, poking at the player with its stinger. It's fitting that Lalabarina's components yield musketeer-looking clothing. I saw at least 2 separate players cosplaying red mages from Final Fantasy by using this armor set, which was sick to see. Right after Lalabarina, the Conga Lala is a weird combination of hippo and baboon. This is the most disgusting animal in this game, as it attacks the player with poo, barf, and gas. But don't turn your nose up too high just yet, as you are able to introduce the Conga to the concept of karmic justice. It wouldn't be a Monster Hunter game without some epic dragon boss fights as well, and there are several in this game. Right now, I'm only going to talk about one that occurs within the first 10 hours of the game, and that's Rayl Deal. Rayl Deal is quite possibly the most interesting lightning dragon I've ever seen in a game, specifically because of the evolutionary storytelling of its design. Essentially, Rayl Deal's spines function like electrical wiring, channeling lightning from the tip of his tail to the horns framing his face. These thunder horns come together in a cone in front of Rayl Deal's face, turning his head into a literal cannon. This is legit one of the sickest things I've ever seen a dragon do in a video game. Adding to this, Rayl Deal's wings function as these massive blades, which further adds to the beauty of his design, both mechanically and artistically. These sorts of design decisions are of consistent quality across the monsters introduced or remixed in Monster Hunter Wilds. These unique enemy types frame the beginning sections of the game. However, Monster Hunter, as a franchise, often reuses monsters from previous games, And this is where my idea that Wilds is more beginner-friendly than World first began to form. Two monsters from World, Odogoron and Anjanath, return in Wilds, but they are changed due to story-based reasons. The only reason I'm bringing up these two at this time is because the changes made to them actually makes them easier than their first iteration, at least in my experience. World was my first Monster Hunter game, and I did play it all the way back in 2018, so I could be misremembering for sure. Yet I found both of these enemies to be way easier in Wilds. While I personally love a nice degree of challenge in my games, ease of play is definitely a core component of maintaining a player's early interest in a franchise. Why would someone want to play a game where they're just getting dunked on all the time? That's why difficulty curves are important, and why I do think Wilds' difficulty curve is skewed in favor of being too easy more often than not. This ease of play makes the early time investment an easier pill to swallow for a new player. World was lauded back in 2018 for how beginner friendly it was compared to the previous games, and it makes sense that Capcom would continue down this path for the base game of Wilds. Some of the later enemies line up with the mid-game difficulty of World, and I expect that harder bosses will be introduced in subsequent expansions, much like how World's hardest fights were added to the game rather than being in the base product itself. This is one of the key aspects of the boss design in Wilds that demonstrates why this game is perfect for beginners, but it's not actually the only reason, as the flashy additions to the combat also enhances the wow factor of trying out the franchise for the first time. The combat in Monster Hunter Wilds is an interesting execution of combo centrism with an importance placed on positioning. Every fight is an ebb and flow of the player anticipating each monster's next move, rather than evading upon reaction. The slow nature of putting away a weapon or healing slowly over time makes the player's positioning one of the most important aspects of any hunt, and this continues to matter in terms of the attacks the player does. In my playthrough, I used 4 weapons for a significant amount of time: Longsword, Sword and Shield, Charge Blade, and Gun Lance. The Gun Lance was my main weapon, which is why all of the footage in this video is of me using it. Each of these weapons are massively different from one another, and this is actually another element of Wild's design that makes it more palatable to the beginner. In World, it really felt like the player was pigeonholed into focusing on a maximum of 2 weapons over the course of the game. It's not like this was actually enforced in the game, but the cost of using more weapons is an inexorable grind that just isn't worth the time or effort. Wilds drops so many resources into the player's lap in every single hunt that, at least in terms of the early and mid-game, they're able to craft and maintain multiple weapons. This is what I did for the first half of my playthrough, and it was only when I started getting into the late game I began to really focus on gun lances. I'll talk more about the grind in depth in a later section, but this is an important thing to mention at this point because the ability for the player to use multiple weapons directly relates to the freshness of the gameplay in every encounter. At times, I would take 2 different weapons into a hunt so that I could switch between them mid-fight, which really does add massive variety to the gameplay. This helps the beginner's experience because it's quite likely that they don't know exactly which weapon they'll want to commit to. In World, you could practice with each weapon and easily do early game hunts with each to test them out, but that's not the same as being able to try out each weapon on the first 3 or 4 bosses of the game to really see if you like the way the weapon feels against different types of encounters. I settled on the Gun Lance because I really like parry builds in games, and this weapon does allow the player to perfect block monsters' attacks, providing them with a couple iframes and a chance to start a combo. While this isn't exactly a parry, it does create the same vibe. It's also the reason that I kept using the Charge Blade for longer than any of my other side weapons. I found that the Gun Lance allowed me to trigger power struggles with monsters more often. A power struggle is when the player and a monster are locked against each other, and the player needs to mash the attack button to rebuff the monster with a powerful free hit. This did make the Gun Lance feel epic, and feeling awesome is an important vibe for games to create to invest new players into a game. Even though it's perhaps not the most powerful thing ever, it certainly feels cool, which matters a lot. Whether we click with a game or not is often tied to how the game makes us feel, and flourishes like this do an excellent job of triggering humanity's hubris. The other aspect of combat that enhances the visual actual flair of Wild's weapon feel are the focus strike attacks, where the player is able to hone in on an open wound, doing a special weapon-specific attack to break the wound and obtain a crafting material from the monster's body. The gun lance turns into a massive drill with an explosive drill bit on the end, and the charge blade begins to cosplay as the whirligig saw from Bloodborne. As the years go on, I'm definitely going to be going back to Wilds from time to time to play around with other weapons, and seeing all of the focus strike animations in this game is a tantalizing prospect. Cool bosses and epic weapons are definitely important selling points for any game, but whether a game respects the player's time is the ultimate metric to determine whether a game is going to work for a new player or not, especially when most players jump from game to game, never really settling on just one thing forever. Monster Hunter is a grindy game series. I'm not saying that as a pejorative, as it is a feature of the franchise that is important to its identity. I'm not super apprised of what the Monster Hunter community looks for in every game, but given how long the series has been around, I would guess the grindiness of the games is a major selling point, not a negative. As someone who really likes JRPGs, a healthy dose of grinding is a great way of prompting the player to experiment with a game's combat system. Sometimes a grind can be truly enjoyable, as long as the player is getting a nice drip feed of rewards for all their efforts. The grind was actually something I loved about World when I first played the game. At least I did love it until I reached a certain point where all of my progress in the game was halted because I couldn't get one item to drop. It's been 7 years, so I don't remember all of the details, but after hunting Gerardus 15 times in a row without getting the item I needed, I stopped playing the game. It's not that the gameplay was getting boring, but I needed a crafting material from that fish to create the weapon I needed to hunt higher level monsters. After 60 hours, I never actually finished World, but after 60 hours in Wilds, I managed to have 6 Rarity 8 weapons with a full set of Rarity 7 armor, with several pieces upgraded to max with armor spheres. This is the reason I wanted to make this video at 60 hours, instead of my initial plan of making it after 100. The difference between what a new player can accomplish in 60 hours between the two games is stark. To be sure, I was moving slower through World than I was in Wilds, but that speed differential doesn't account entirely for the massive difference in my personal progression between the two games. Wilds is extremely generous in terms of providing the player upgrade materials, which is the reason that the grind in this game isn't as slow as in World. It's the reason I was able to field 4 different weapons plus multiple types of gun lances over the course of my playthrough, and it's the reason I was able to make 6 Rarity 8 gun lances within the 60 hours of my playthrough, a playthrough in which I moved at my own pace, not necessarily trying to rush to the end. I just played the game, lackadaisical in my way through it, using materials suboptimally. Even the Rarity 8 late game grind isn't too bad. Each weapon at that tier requires hunter symbols numbered 1 to 3, and these symbols can only be attained in high level hunts, usually against multiple tempered or powered up versions of monsters. Even these aren't too bad to get though, as you're able to increase the number from each hunt by catching the tempered monsters. It's through this way that I would end hunts with 3 to 4 hunter symbols, at least for tier 1 and tier 2 symbols. If I didn't want to try and get every Rarity 8 gun lance, I could have gotten 6 different weapons up to Rarity 8, which shows just how freely Capcom gives players upgrade materials. And while this does condense the Monster Hunter experience into a smaller package, which might be a downside for hardcore fans of the series, it is a massive boon for the beginner's experience with the game. In a couple years or so, I definitely want to revisit World, because there are so many late game bosses from that title that look crazy sick, and I'd love to be able to fight them. And while the story of World isn't one of the key selling points for the game, it is something I'd like to see again because some of the themes in Wilds surprised me in a good way. There are two themes that truly stand out in Wilds: environmental protection and anti-colonialism. Neither of these themes interfere with the main point of the game, however I found both to be pretty obvious as well. Clearly the monster hunting in Wilds is entirely centered around the controlled killing and reduction of overproliferated populations. That's something that's mentioned quite often in the main quest of the game, as Alma, your research guide, will authorize you to kill monsters that are disturbing the balance of nature, or who are otherwise causing danger to the delicate balance of the food chain within the environment. A great example of this is how you're tasked with killing a monster who is infected with disease, just like what we do whenever we come across a case of mad cow or rabies. This is a measure that is done to save more of the species in question, and it's cool how this real-world concept is brought into Wilds. Hunting monsters to keep populations under control mirrors the real-world necessity of hunting animals to balance out the population levels. In the area of the states where I live, this is what we do primarily with deer, and I actually used to have this friend who measured the populations of deer in my state to determine exactly how many deer are needed to be hunted in the upcoming deer season. Secondly, the anti-colonialism theme in this story is a bit more subtle. It's only in lines where the player's party of researchers interact with the indigenous people of the game's setting that it comes up. Oftentimes, the player's group will ask for permission to do things before crossing cultural boundaries, and this theme is so small and unobtrusive that I wouldn't be shocked if many people just didn't see it. It is only a line here or there every 10 hours after all. It's actually nice to see these types of themes return to a state of subtlety, much like how they were in the games of the past. Surprisingly, I also found myself enjoying some of the characters in this game, something that was not true of World. Despite playing that game for 60 hours, I couldn't name or describe one single character other than the Master Chef Palico, of course. In Wilds, the big standout character to me is Rove. The player meets him as he's being bound into a nice snack pack by a spider monster, Nursilla. It's an odd quirk of mine that I play Japanese games not in English, nor in Japanese. I play them in Spanish, even though I can't speak or understand Spanish at all. I just like the sound of the voice acting the Spanish voice actors do. The reason this detail matters is that it completely changes the vibe of this particular scene, turning it into something that subjected me into a fit of gut-busting laughter. When Rove philosophizes at the camera, he sounds like Puss in Boots to me, which is what I called him for the remainder of my playthrough.
Sufro, lucho, luego existo. Enfrentado a la muerte, por fin me siento vivo.
I was already sound on playing Japanese games in Spanish after my Tears of the Kingdom playthrough in 2023, but this scene in Wild solidified my conviction. I don't want to say anything else about the story for those of you who still want to play the game for yourself, so it's time to finish out this review by answering the question I answer at the end of each of my reviews. Will this game make my top 100 of the 2020s? Monster Hunter Wilds will be making my top 100 of the 2020s, and it will be entering the list in the red category. Games on my various top 100 lists are either categorized as red or blue, with the red category meaning the game is immune to being cut, for now at least. I could see Wilds moving into the blue category as time goes on and I play better games, but for now it deserves its solid space on this list. It is number 57 on the growing list for this decade, putting it in the top 25% of games I've played from the 2020s so far. I've still got 448 games left on my backlog from this decade, and that number is definitely going to increase as time goes on, which is why I say this game could leave by the time I finalize the list. Regardless, Wilds is a great game and worth the price of admission, so if it sounds like something you would like, I definitely recommend you give it a play. And that's the video, my guys. What do you think of Monster Hunter Wilds? Are you liking it so far? Did I sell you on the game or push you away from giving it a try? Let's discuss in the comments below, and while you're there, smash that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. I make new gaming videos every single Friday, and I've got loads of videos that'll be coming out in the coming weeks and months. Notably, I'll be reviewing Doom Dark Ages and the Final Fantasy Magic: The Gathering expansion set later this year. And if either of those things are of interest to you, you'll definitely want to stick around. My big goal for the year is 10,000 subs, and with your help, I know I can get there. Regardless of what you choose to do, thank you for keeping it real with Rayl Deal Games. Have an awesome day, my friend.